I gotta see everybody. Hello. Welcome, welcome back. Okay, welcome everyone. We're gonna get started here in about 3 minutes. If you can find the chat, that helps us know it's working. We're going to have you sign in as usual. If you've been with us before, please give us your name and where you're working or what you do or how you're connected to working with kids. And then we'd also like you to type into the chat what your favorite sunny weather activity is, because today, where we are, it's really sunny and nice out. So please share what your favorite sunny weather activity is. And thank you for joining us if you live in the area and you're inside with us instead of out in the sunny, warm weather. Oh, okay, Jen's got some rain. My little sister's in Minnesota and she said it was raining today too. She said it reminded her of Oregon. Like, oh, we got sunny weather.
Good job, Deanna, sitting outside, glass of wine. That's the best way to do a PD.
I'm with Jackie too, like getting outside, getting to the park. It's really nice. I don't have a dog, but if I did, definitely a fan. Ooh, swimming. Who's swimming? Lynn? Yes, love swimming too. Oh, and Deborah's gonna go to the beach with her dogs. All right, I like that too. My coworkers and I were joking about driving to the beach today instead of coming to work, but we went to work, so. All right, we're gonna wait like 1 more minute. If you have another fun activity you'd like to do in sunny weather, feel free to type it in the chat. And Jen, I know it's raining where you are. Maybe what's your favorite rainy day activity? Coming to presentations? All right. Welcome, 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 Donice. All right, awesome, awesome. All right, so if you're just joining us, nice, reading a book, excellent. So we're sharing our favorite sunny weather activity because here where we are, it is sunny and warm. So we're sharing in the chat what we would like to do in sunny weather. All right. Oh, hiking, yes. That sounds great. Mallet, sorry, not sure how to pronounce your name. I'm also dyslexic, so that doesn't help.
Yeah, it's Mahalet.
Mallet?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate you chiming in there. Excellent. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We might have some more people joining us, but if you were just joining us now, we were typing our name in the chat, how we're connected to working with people that are dyslexic, if you're a teacher, tutor, parent, and then also sharing what we like to do in sunny, warm weather. And then Angie, you can take it away.
Yeah, welcome you guys. I'm excited that you're here. I'm really impressed if you are in an area with one of our first really nice sunny warm days. So thank you for coming. Tonight we're talking about fluency. Can you also add to the chat right now real fast a Y if you've seen us before and N if you haven't? I know for sure that there's a lot of familiar names and faces that have been here before. But I think that, yeah, we do have some new, I was thinking that we have some new names and faces. So, so welcome if you haven't seen us before, and welcome back if you have seen us before. We've been doing this series all year. So a little bit of information for anyone that is unfamiliar with this is You will at the end get a copy of the slideshow. So everything that's in the slideshow, you'll get a copy of that, or you'll get a copy of the slideshow. This is also being recorded, so you'll get a copy of the recording. Anyone that has registered will get a copy of the recording. We do ask that we keep the recording of this to people that have been registered, or for yourself to use. There are true professionals out there that have done a lot of webinars, and if you're going to share something with colleagues or your staff at school, we just kind of feel like there's probably better webinars with stronger experts out there. So we ask that the recording that you receive just be shared just for people that have registered. We are 2 teachers on a journey of learning, and you're joining us on that journey. So that's that. You will also get PDUs emailed to you at the end also. So a little bit of information about me. I'm Angie Pepworth. I am a first grade teacher. This is my 17th year of teaching. And I love all things about how kids learn how to read. This is definitely how I love to nerd out, and I'm passionate and interested in this. I became interested in this because my 13-year-old son has dyslexia. And when he was learning how to read, none of us knew what was going on, including me. I did not recognize dyslexia in him. And so by the time he was in 3rd grade, I figured out what was going on, and I just began this journey of learning what is dyslexia, which got me down the journey of of actually discovering that I didn't really know how kids learned how to read. And I didn't really know what I was doing as a teacher for all those years. So I've really enjoyed kind of learning the science of how kids learn how to read, and just learning a lot about this. So Becca, do you want to tell us about you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Becca Hauge. I'm a special education teacher at the same school as Angie. So we work at the elementary level. So I primarily serve students with learning disabilities in K-5. So I do a lot of reading, writing, math, phonological awareness. So obviously dyslexia is kind of huge and center of what I do. Even though we can't necessarily diagnose it, I definitely work with students who are showing signs of dyslexia. And this is my 12th year teaching. And when I went through training to learn about dyslexia, I realized I'm also dyslexic. Spelling was really hard for me. So I was reading for a little period of time, but now I'm teaching students and I'm learning a lot myself. So I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight, and thank you so much for joining us.
And we also do love an active chat. So feel free to jump in with the chat with any information, any questions that you have, anything you want to share, any thoughts or resources or anything like that. So definitely be active in the chat. There will be some times when you can just unmute and join us too, but definitely make this work for you and be involved with us tonight. So our focus tonight is fluency. And okay, so this is the reading rope, and the reading rope doesn't list fluency exactly, but it is intertwined in a lot of different parts here. And so fluency is intertwined with vocabulary and language structures, with decoding, with sight recognition. Fluency is kind of the magic of where it all comes together, and it really kind of holds, as the strands get tighter, it's kind of what holds it all together and really makes that rope strong. And it's also kind of how the rope shows its strength. So fluency is a complicated, as I've been prepping for this presentation, I realized how complicated it is and how it's involved in so many different parts of this, and really kind of brings this rope all together. It is one of the big 5. There you go. And so a lot of times we talk about the big 5 as teachers in reading. Phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, and comprehension are 4 things that are pretty obvious in the rope and our direct presentations that we have done or will do. And fluency is one of these big 5. So this is the reading rope and the big 5 are kind of 2 different ways that show like how reading is a big process with lots of complex parts, and fluency is one of those big parts to it. So just some kind of point that this is a slide that we've had every single time. And so just to review, decoding means using letter sound knowledge to read. Encoding is using that same knowledge to write. And we really believe that reading and writing are so intertwined that it's like breathing in and breathing out. And so because of that, tonight our focus is reading fluency and writing fluency. So in all of our presentations and in all of reading, reading like things that we've talked about, we really believe that reading and writing are so intertwined that most things, it's very direct. You're doing them together, and students become better readers and writers when they are combined. Fluency is something that's reading fluency and writing fluency are definitely different, but we are including both of them because of our strong belief that reading and writing are so intertwined. The other reason why we're doing a lot of writing fluency focus tonight is because we didn't have another presentation about it, and we really believe that it's really important. So tonight's presentation, the first half-ish is focused on reading fluency, and the second half is focused on writing fluency. So just kind of know that that's our big picture this evening, that we're really talking about both of them. We've even thought in the future this probably could be 2 presentations, but we're bringing it all together tonight. So there's kind of a part 1 and part 2 tonight.
All right, so you guys have seen this slide before, but just kind of reviewing. So dyslexia for students that are struggling in reading will look like a lot of these signs. So they're slow with learning letter sounds or letter names, have difficulty with connecting those sounds to the symbols, the graphemes, or the letters. They'll have difficulty with reading or decoding. And then as you'll see tonight, they'll have difficulty as well with fluency. They'll sound choppy sometimes. I have a couple students like that. And then they have difficulty and they'll misread words or substitute words for others. And then that'll come out in writing where they avoid writing some words or they will use the wrong vowels in the words or add sounds or delete sounds just because they're not making that connection. All right, so the first thing we're going to show you here is an example of 2 students doing a rapid automatic naming. This is available in the system that we have for assessing students on a monthly basis. So, but it hasn't been standardized yet in Oregon, so we can't actually use it. But the idea of the rapid automatic naming for students with dyslexia is that you're presenting them with the same like 5 symbols, and then they're just reading them over and over and over. So if you look at this copy, you'll notice it's the same numbers. So there's 1, 2, 5, 8, and 4. Okay. So, and the idea is that the students just read it and you time them and then you see how fast they are. So we're going to show you 2 examples. These are upper elementary students.
Go.
2 5 1 8 1 5 2 4 8 4 1 4 4 1 8 4 2 8 5 1 5 5 5 4 2 1 8 1 8 2 8 2 1 5 8 4 1 8 5 4 5 5 2 4 1 5 2 5 8 2 8 2.
So as you notice, this student seemed pretty fluent at the beginning, but slowed down and then started saying 8th instead of 8, and even asked 8 at one point. And even was laughing at one point. And this student has signs of dyslexia. So that was pretty clear. Now I'm going to have you listen to an average reader.
Go.
2 5 1 8 1 5 2 4 8 4 4 1 8 4 2 8 5 1 5 5 5 4 2 1 8 1 8 2 8 2 1 5 8 4 1 8 5 4 5 5 1 4 1 5 2 5 8 2 8 2.
And you'll notice with that one, it was way more fluid and fluent. That student could identify what the numbers were and was not stumbling like the previous student. There was one error if you were paying attention. He said 1 instead of 2, but in general, he knew what they were. So if you think about students and fluency, if they have dyslexia, sometimes they see the number or they see the letter and they know the sound, but that's not what comes out, or it takes them a while to bring it out. So that's just something to consider. And it's not all students that struggle with rapid naming, but it is a big piece for dyslexia. And hopefully in Oregon, we will have this standardized so that we can assess it at the K1 level. You don't usually assess it higher up unless they're being evaluated for special education. Angie, did you want to say anything else?
No, I think that covers it really well. It's really interesting to see this, and it really definitely shows like that, you know, that it's not just a decoding thing that slows students down with dyslexia. When I was getting ready for this, I actually did one of these myself, and I have dyslexia, mild dyslexia, and it was frustrating to me when I did one that was colors, and it was interesting to me to feel that frustration of like, why can't that word come out? And why am I stumbling on that? So I definitely just had a touch of that frustration that our students feel, and the giggling too of like the one student did, she kind of giggled when she messed up. So definitely connected to, I think one thing to add is that that rapid naming isn't something that we directly teach, but it's something that, and I don't know if it's something that can really significantly improve over time, but it's something that the dyslexic brain often has, not all, like Becca said, that so it's something that will always slow down fluency, I guess. Is that right, Becca?
Yeah. And it's possible, I guess, like, I'm sure you could work on trying to do things faster. I'm similar to Angie, where I have a hard time like finding words. And so I haven't done that assessment on myself, but I'm pretty sure I would be the same way, where I'd be like red, blue, orange. And I would get stuck because I can think of words, but they don't necessarily come out, like I can't find it. So, but I think that you could probably do things to improve that, but it's not something we as teachers will be working on.
Okay, so just some background vocabulary that we'll use a lot tonight. We're going to be talking a lot more in depth in the next few slides about automaticity and prosody. They are kind of the key parts of fluency. So automaticity is the simple, fast, effortless reading. We often measure incorrect words per minute and how fast you can read correctly, and how you can, that's not exactly true. It's not how fast you can read correctly, that's rate, but it's how automatically you can read in a very effortless way. Prosody is reading with expression. So that is the slowing down and speeding up and reading interesting in an interesting sounding way. Accuracy is correct decoding, reading what's actually written on the page. And rate is, we use a lot, is correct words per minute, how fast you read words correctly. So fluency is the bridge between phonics and comprehension, really. So phonics, actually it's more than phonics. This little cute island says phonics, but really it's like word automaticity, word study. So fluency is this bridge. There's really kind of two parts of it. Like I just said, automaticity and prosody. So at one end of the bridge, fluency connects to phonics through the automaticity and decoding. At the other end of the bridge, fluency connects to comprehension and the ability to read through prosody, through expressive interpretations, through like reading in an interesting way based on the meaning of the text. And so, go ahead, yep. So really we're gonna kind of zoom in rather on automaticity and prosody. So I even read when I was, I've even read that fluency could almost be divided into two things, automaticity and prosody, and they bunched it together, but it's really two different things. And so automaticity is the fast, effortless reading. It's influenced or it includes accuracy, rate, the correct words per minute. It's orthographic mapping is what leads to automaticity. So having those words in our brain in a way that we instantly know them. Sight words are words that that anyone automatically reads without having to decode them sound by sound or syllable by syllable. It's influenced and impacted by phonological awareness skills, phonics skills being automatically applied, and also vocabulary and morphology knowledge and skills affects how automatically we can read. Prosody is reading with expression. It includes things like pacing, like how fast or slow we read depending on the meaning of the text. Emphasis, like if we say he went to the store, like how much emphasis we put on different words, or stress. Phrasing, how we chunk words together here and there, or at the zoo, how we chunk like phrases together when we read. It's reading with expression, and it's our knowledge of vocabulary applied with how we put all of these things into our reading with prosody, like our pacing and our emphasis. So they're really kind of two different things that are connected and put under fluency. And it's a really important bridge that brings all of the stuff that we've kind of been talking about all year, all the phonological awareness and phonics and morphology and vocabulary, and connects it with the comprehension, and just kind of brings reading together in a nice neat package, I guess, if that makes sense. So this I also, I really liked this graphic because it kind of talks about language as a whole. So this graphic is really about language fluency and how there's a lot of parts to it. So tonight we're going to be talking about mostly reading fluency and writing fluency, but we're also going to touch on speaking fluency. And so I like this because it just kind of shows that how with language we have input, we have output, we have spoken, and we have written. And so listening is spoken language coming in, and we speak it is our output. Writing going in and reading is the language going in, and writing is it coming out. So it's all connected, and it's all combined to make kind of a big picture of how we are fluent in a language. So so it's not just, a lot of times, I'll say this, I have always just kind of thought of fluency, and I've thought, how many correct words per minute? And I've kind of stopped there. And so it's a lot more complex, and there's a lot of different levels to it. And it's also very simple and things that I've thought about, but not really connected in my mind to fluency before. This book you're going to see a lot tonight, and it's one of my new favorite books. I recently discovered it. It's the Mega Book of Fluency. So the author of this, one of the authors, the main guy, is Tim Rosinski, and Tim Rosinski is one of the leaders on fluency, and he has written several books. This one I really like. I'm going to show you in a little bit here some of his activities that he has in here. This book is like a direct instruction of how to teach fluency. It's fabulous. It has a lot of ready to go lessons and a few pages for each lesson plan, and then you can learn them and take them into and kind of put them into and apply them to the reading that they're doing to your decodable. Anyways, we'll get into that. I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me back up a minute. So Tim Rosinski is kind of a leader in fluency, and he created this saying, what is fluency? And he says it's ears. So E stands for expression, A stands for automatic word recognition, R stands for rhythm and phrasing, and S stands for smoothness. And then all of these things that are listed underneath here are what he includes. In this book, there's even like there's even rubrics that you can assess students on their fluency in these 4 areas. I really like this because it kind of, again, shows the complexity of reading fluency and how it's a lot more than just correct words per minute. So we have talked a lot about, go ahead and click through this because the answer is there, but we don't know the questions yet. So we've talked a lot about how reading instructions should be explicit, systematic, and multisensory. And can fluency instruction be these 3? Yes, it can. And we're going to give you some examples tonight, and it shows that like we can actually, fluency is more than just the product of reading or the product of practice, and it's more than just practice silent reading or 1-minute readings. It can be, and it should be, directly taught in an explicit way, and it can be multisensory, and it should be systematic too. So one way to start the easiest way that all grade levels could be doing is to simply model fluent reading, but not just model fluent reading, talk about it. So when we are doing our read alouds as teachers, when parents are reading one-on-one with kids at bedtime, to model that fluent reading, but do a little bit more and kind of point it out explicitly to students. So when I was reading today, what did I do to make it more interesting? Did you notice when I slowed down or spoke quieter? Why did I do that? What did I do to show the feelings of the characters? So like actually pointing out to kids and having a discussion of like, what did you enjoy about this read aloud today? How did you know how the character was feeling? What parts were interesting to you and why? And we know as adults what fluent reading sounds like that we enjoy listening to. Audiobooks are very popular, and there's a reason why, because we still like listening to fluent reading. And there are definitely times when I've downloaded whatever, bought an audiobook, borrowed an audiobook, and I don't like it. Like the voice just doesn't work for me, or they just don't read in a fluent way that makes it enjoyable to listen to. So as teachers, we can be modeling this, but we should also be talking about it. And that's a lesson in and of itself that's really easy to add in to our days. There's also a lot of levels of fluency. So there's fluency with letter sounds, reading across letters, g. There's fluency with reading words. There's fluency with reading phrases, because when we get to passages and longer things that we're reading, our minds we read in phrases. So you can actually practice those and teach those as just that. Let's practice reading phrases. We know that, what to do, above and below, which way to go. Practice fluency in sentences, and then practice fluency in passages. And all of these can be spiraled around depending on the grade level that you're working with. So the letter sound fluency in older grades could include digraphs or more complex spelling patterns, as they are learning more complex spelling patterns. So you can even do letter sounds in older grades with the more complex phonics patterns that they're learning. So you shouldn't do just one all the time. You should kind of be spiraling through these and doing all levels. Okay, so speaking fluency, let's kind of pause to talk about that. If we can't really ask kids, or expect kids, I should say, we can't really expect kids to be reading fluently if they're not able to speak fluently. And so we need to actually work on speaking fluently in order to make sure that they can read fluently. If kids are talking choppy, or if they talk really fast, or if they don't know where to pause naturally when they're talking, how can we expect them to do that when they're reading, or when they're reading what a character is talking, how it should sound? So we need to be really concretely talking and practicing speaking fluency. And we can do this through like our class meetings. We can do this through just class dialogue. We can teach how it sounds to say a sentence, and just really kind of teach our students in very organic ways of how to speak in fluent ways, and make sure that we're aware of that and talking about that. So speaking fluency is something that pre-readers, like kinder and first teachers, can work on, but it's also something that we can talk about really at any grade level. And as people, we need to practice our I'm stumbling over the word speaking fluency. That might be irony there. So throughout our lives, we practice our speaking fluency, and it's just an important skill in and of itself. So that's kind of one piece of this slide. The other piece is that in primary grades, speaking fluency is an introduction to reading fluency later. So before our students are reading, before they're able to read enough to practice fluency as readers, they can be practicing speaking fluency. So They can memorize, sometimes like memorize text or nursery rhymes, or using wordless books and just telling the story and trying to tell it in a way that sounds fluent and sounds like it makes sense, and put emphasis on important words or parts of the story. But even memorizing those nursery rhymes and saying those together is a way for that. They're practicing speaking fluency, which will then later become reading fluency skills. So one of the things, anytime you see this little book, it's a lesson straight out of this book. So one of the lessons in this book that I really love is practicing responding to punctuation with a way that, with something that the kids already know how to read. So you're taking out all phonics and decoding, and you're having them practice just paying attention to punctuation without having to like sound out words. You can do this with ABCs. You can do this with 1, 2, 3s. You could even, he has a page in there that just says blah, 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 and you add punctuation to it, and you can add. So presenting this to students, I actually did this with my kids in my first grade class that are reading today, and they loved it. They thought it was really silly and really fun, but it made them like realize that punctuation actually matters. So you would read this. Let me try it. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. And you can have kids add their own punctuation and fill it in and read it to each other. You could do it with other things that they know how to say, or that they know how to read and say, so that it's easier to pay attention just to punctuation. When I was getting ready for this, I was talking to somebody, and we were talking about how Spanish is really helpful because you see the punctuation before you read the sentence. So at the beginning of the sentence, you see that question mark and you know that you're going to get there. But but in English, you have to like wait till the end or peek ahead. So practicing that skill. Telling jokes, that's a great one. Telling knock-knock jokes, or any jokes really, because that is practicing anything that we could get them to practice talking out loud and saying these things out loud. Knock-knock jokes are good because they have the question in there too, for them to practice that part. Another one that I really like in this is to emphasize different words for meaning. So you give kids a worksheet like this, and as they read through it, you discuss or they take notes on different meaning, how it changes the meaning of a word. So I think this is something for me, like I've always kind of known, like you, and talked about casually maybe, that you change emphasis, but, and it changes the meaning of a sentence, but I've never really talked about that with kids, and it can be directly and explicitly taught. So she didn't ask Dad to go to the mall. Maybe somebody else asked, maybe something, you know, like she wasn't the one that asked. She didn't ask Dad to go to the mall. Or she didn't ask Dad to go to the mall. She didn't ask Dad to go to the mall. Maybe she asked Mom, Grandma, somebody else, who knows? Go ahead and click once more, Becca. Because what kids can do with this is they can take notes, or they can have a discussion of, okay, when you emphasize something else, what does it mean? So this is showing you, this is teaching kids that it matters where to put emphasis. And if this was a part of a story, you have to kind of think, you have to be able to understand the meaning of the story in order to know where to put the emphasis, because in books, words aren't bolded. We just have to know that through comprehension skills. So teaching them like, okay, what is this? Where is the emphasis? What's the most important word? And I started this with my first graders in a sentence today. We're studying something that had the words big mess in it. And I just said, what's the most important word in this? And we said, oh, probably the size of the mess. We decided the mess being really big was important. So I can't remember the whole sentence, but what we said was, then we were kind of speaking, we were practicing our speaking fluency, really, because all they were doing was kind of just copying me and repeating me, even though they had the words in front of them, and said, you know, whatever it was, so-and-so made a big mess. And they were practicing their phonics skills that we're learning, or talking about them. And we were also talking about what the meaning of that was, and what word we want to say a little bit louder and a little bit longer for emphasis, and how that changes the meaning. Another fun one is to take one sentence and instead of changing the emphasis on different words, change the feeling for how you say it. So read the same text, but with different feelings. So using the phrase, come inside this minute, reading it like, or saying it like you're a mom or dad yelling to your children because dinner is ready is different than saying you're a fish telling its owner to put food in the fish tank. You're a teacher yelling at students because a huge rainstorm is coming. I like that one. So I was thinking how that's very different. Like if I was a teacher yelling at my kids because something was happening out on the playground, I would sound different and I'd be like, come inside this minute, come inside. Versus a mom, whether I'm yelling at my kids because dinner's ready, come inside right this minute. And so talking about how we read these with different tones, the purpose of them is taking, this is where that bridge is tying to attention, because they have to understand the purpose of that. And oftentimes they'll understand part of a bigger story, or they kind of figure out, what is this sentence really saying? What are the, here I go with my speaking fluency, not strong again. What do I think is the purpose of this, and how am I going to say it and read it in a way that shows that is a direct connection between comprehension and fluency. And it's not just correct words per minute, it's actually that prosody. Another real common way to practice fluency and to teach fluency is reader's theater. And it's so the Mega Book of Fluency has a few of these really simple one-page reader's theaters where it's just like two people and they're reading back and forth and having a conversation. There's some great curriculum out there that are longer reader's theaters. So sometimes the longer ones intimidate me because they feel like there's like multiple pages for kids to flip through and it takes a lot of work. But if even a simple one that's like a conversation between two characters is practicing fluency. So it doesn't have to be as big and overwhelming. It could be done in a simpler way when we have less time or something. There's also, this also reminds me of like poetry for two voices is a lot of times a conversation. One of my reading groups this week is reading home. That is a conversation between a mom telling a kid to go to bed and the kid coming up with all these excuses of why not. And it matches what we're learning in our phonics skills, but also giving them practice with this fluency. So the beauty of reader's theater, or any kind of conversation that they are simply reading but will perform, is that they have to practice it a lot. So that repeated reading is really important practice for fluency. It gives them a purpose if they are able to perform it, even for their classmates or for another reading group. And the prosody is really important when you're doing reader's theater, because you have to sound like you are that character talking. So you have to sound talking. So prosody is really a strong strength in reader's theater. Another way to practice fluency is to do a repeated reading, but adding one word every time. So there's two examples here. One is you add a word every time, and one is you add a phrase every time. So it kind of depends on, and I would do both of these because sometimes we practice fluency of phrases and sometimes we practice fluency of words. But what this does is it makes them repeatedly read, which is great for fluency practice. And it also gives them the practice to decode one phrase or one word at a time. So the student would read the sailboat like this: soon, soon they saw, soon they saw their dad, and so on. So they add one word at a time and it just gets longer. So they're repeatedly reading those same few words over and over. The other one is he jumped into bed. He jumped into bed and pulled. He jumped into bed and pulled the covers. He jumped into bed and pulled the covers over his head. So it teaches them like little by little to add more repeating practice, and also practicing just repeating the words and adding a little bit more every time. Okay, so one thing that is really a great an important thing and an organic way to add in fluency is just to use the decodable readers that you're already using to practice your weekly or your current phonics skills. So these two papers are from the Literacy Nest, which is, there's a link in here later that has really great systematic and systematic decodables that go through letter sounds. So this is for the TH sounds in their sentences and a passage. And so when we are learning the TH sound in my class, these are the decodables we're practicing. But the students can do more than just decode it word by word. They can decode it word by word. We can talk about the TH sound, and then we can talk about then we can tie it to comprehension. What does this mean? What's the most important part? The path is not thin. Well, what do you think is important about that? What should we make important about it? The most important part is the path is not thin. It's really, what does that mean? It means it's really wide. Okay, let's emphasize that. The path is not thin. So you can tie this into decodables. It's really important when you're practicing fluency to make sure that you are using passages, sentences, passages, words that the kids mostly can read. So if the reading is too difficult, or it includes words that they haven't learned how to sound out yet, or that aren't sight words for them, or they are still struggling with, they're not quite ready to use that as a reading fluency passage or practice. And so that's also where the repeated readings comes in, because something like this with my students, I'll have them practice it a few times. And the first few times it's very slow and it's very word by word because it's their current phonics level. But the more they read it, the faster they get and the smoother they get. And we start putting it into phrases and we start combining it and putting emphasis on words. So just to be really careful, because there's a lot of fluency practice pages out there that are full of words that they haven't learned how to read yet. And so it's really, there's kind of a magical combination of teaching your fluency built into the decodable readers that they already know how to read those words or are learning how to read those words. So one of the biggest and most important things, this has kind of come up in a lot of these little things for fluency, is just to read again and again, repeated readings. But we know that kids don't like that. So I know that I have students that, you're making me read it again, or I get to the end and I go pop back to the beginning and read it again. And it's like, and it just kind of like shuts them down, and the negative attitude and the not liking reading kicks in really fast. So the trick to that is, so we know repeated readings is great fluency practice. But what we need to do is give it a purpose, because that's what creates the motivation. And that can be kind of tricky to do, but some ideas is to have either an adult volunteer when they are allowed back in our schools, or instructional assistants, or some kind of adult listen to them one-on-one. So often by the end of the week, I have one of my IAs that comes in and she listens to some of my students just read one-on-one with a decodable passage that they've been practicing for a few days. And so it gives them like, I'm going to get ready to read this. Sometimes I use a grown-up in the school that I know that they really appreciated, like going back to their kinder teacher and reading it. And that's not doable every day or every week, of course, because other adults in the school have jobs and they're busy, but it can be really motivating to get them to that point of like, oh, I know that, your kinder teacher would be so proud to hear you read this whole poem. Do you want to read it to her sometime? Sometimes when kids have made a really big jump in fluency, or they're really proud, I'll send them down to the office and I'll read it to the principal. Or actually, I'll send her an email and say, sometime can my kid come down and read this to you? He's been working really hard on it. And that gives the kid a lot of pride. So giving them a motivation of why I'm reading this over and over again and getting really good at it. Buddy reading can do that too. So I know my school's not doing buddy reading again yet, but when that can be added, so that's the older students and younger students reading together. If both grades start with a decodable passage that they've been practicing, the younger kids, it can all be differentiated at their level. And the younger kids can read to their passage to the older kids. The older kids can have a page that they've been practicing to read to the younger kids. And then they could even have I used to do buddy reading with just fun book time, and they just looked at books and enjoyed them together. That can also be included. So it can be a little bit of, hey, I get to read this to my buddy on Friday, and then we are going to still have time to look at books. I also, almost every time we read something, before I just send it home, I will have my students choose who they're going to read to at home. So, and I kind of let them get silly and I write across the top. So who are you going to read this to at home? I'm going to read it to mom, dad, my dog, and my cat. And I'll write that across the top. And I usually just make them choose at least one human, but they will often add in an animal or their stuffies or something like that. So, and then I communicate with families, like make sure that when you're getting these pages that look like a page of reading at home, celebrate your student reading that to you, your child reading that to you. So using those families at home too. So just a few other things to throw into. The first three on here are I feel like the most important and are good practice and are common practice. So choral reading is reading as a group. And I know, and partner reading is reading with two kids together. You do have to be a little careful, or I should say that there's definitely be kids that are just kind of riding the wave and not reading or not sounding out words, but they're hearing the fluency and they're saying it with somebody and they're working through it. Choral reading is a good way for everyone to kind of feel like a fluent reader, even if they're kind of riding the wave of other people saying it first. Partner reading can be done. You just have to really make sure those kids have already mastered that sheet, that paper, that passage, those words, before you kind of set them free, because a partner's not going to give them the corrective feedback that they need. So so that's kind of the final step, or a step where you're making sure that they're reading something that they can read and they're probably going to read it correctly, because some partners are great at corrective feedback, but some aren't. So corrective feedback is really important to practice fluency, because otherwise they're reading words incorrectly and moving right on, and they don't even realize that, or no one's holding them accountable. So so that's tricky to do with 25 kids and one teacher, but it's important to try to get in there. Echo reading is where you read a line and then they repeat it. And really that's practicing speaking fluency, but that's okay too. We know that that's important. And so that can be done. It's just not the only thing that should be done. Audio recording assisted reading would be where they're listening to it. It's kind of like the program Read Naturally. If you are familiar with that, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But it's listening to it fluently read, and then they're either reading along or they practice reading it afterwards. Another strategy in a small group is that everyone is reading around and they're whisper reading, and then I zone in, or I kind of tap one kid and I say, you read a little bit louder, wherever you're at, just read a little bit louder when I put my finger on your page, and then go back to a whisper when I switch over to this kid. So they're all reading at the same time, but you still can get a chance to listen to them all read at least a little bit of it to you. So it's a way, it's what you want to avoid is round robin, where they are all just listening to each other read non-fluently, because that doesn't help them to listen to their friend read in a non-fluent way. So, and just a reminder that passages should be at or even a little below their level to practice fluency. Okay, so many of us have these posters. I've seen these posters. Some of them have them up in the classroom. And a lot of these have reading strategies. We call these reading strategies posters, and we talk about them, the good, the bad, and they're never ugly. They're very cute. So there's two that I'm going to cross out right away. So I want you to kind of think about which two on here that maybe you really dislike too. You can even type it in if you know which one is not a good one. So go ahead. So eagle eye is a bad one, because what it is saying is look at the picture and use the picture to tell you what to read. And that's never the message we want to tell kids. We want to tell kids that the words and the letters are the boss. They tell you what to read. So you can look at the picture to understand something that you've decoded, and you could look at the picture. Sometimes the pictures tell a separate story. In really good picture books, there's some that there's a kind of a story going on in the picture. I'm thinking of like Jan Brett has a lot like that. So it's not like we're saying don't look at the pictures, but if I'm struggling with a word, I want to teach the kids to use what they know about phonics and not what the picture is to sound out that word. The other one I'm going to cross out right away is Skippy Frog, which is skipping the word and coming back to it later, because we really want them to know, like, no, we're going to tackle this word. The letters are the boss. We have to follow what they say. Let's tackle this word and let's figure this out. So in general, these posters are really common, and in general, I just don't like them at all. So I'm going to show you what I do like. So I kind of go ahead, Becca. I kind of don't like those, and I love these. These are free. No, I'm sorry. This, you can download a black and white copy of these ones free. You can buy these cute, colorful ones. So these are some reading strategies that I just feel like they kind of cover all the cutesy little animals, but they are more the meat of teaching reading. And they kind of cover it all, but there's one that I would add. Go ahead and click and show the one I would add. So we talk about reading left to right. We talk about graphing grasshopper. We sound out all the sounds. Then we do blendy wendy to put it together. If it's a long word, we break it into syllables. As we're learning about prefixes and suffixes, we circle those and separate those. Lucy Lightbulb is just saying, hey, as readers, we're always thinking, and we always better ask ourselves, does this make sense? Do I understand what this means? What is this story about? What's the most important word in the sentence? I, in my class, have added flexible Fred, which is kind of a reflection of sometimes, especially with syllable division, you have to be flexible in the way you try it. So if you're trying to sound out the word silent and you think it might be, the first syllable might be a closed syllable, so you read silent, and silent isn't a word that I know. So I have to be flexible, and I have to just try a different syllable type. Oh, maybe that L goes with the second syllable and the first one's open, so maybe it's silent, and oh, that's a word I know. So I'm just kind of being flexible as you try sounding it out. So so just kind of think about that we're concretely telling kids to use. And then the other thing is to not have kids guess or substitute synonyms or misread words. So when there is a mistake, stop them. This is the immediate corrective feedback that they need, that they don't get when they're silently reading or reading by themselves or necessarily reading with a partner. But don't let them read home for house or pony for horse, because we need to make sure that they are stopping themselves and paying attention to what's most important and what's there. So there's a few videos there that you can use with students to teach them kind of how to not guess and play with guess. So those are links there that you can go back and watch at some point if interested. Okay, so the 1 minute test, we all do this. Schools love it. We talk about it a lot. It's our data that we go to. And the pros of this one, it's kids read for 1 minute. We count how many correct words that they've read in that minute, and that's their reading level right now. And are they high risk, some risk, low risk? How are they doing? Have they improved? Have they gone up in word reading? So the pro is that it does reflect reading skill, and it does show reading growth over time. It is supported by science and research that says, yes, it's a way to have a really quick look at how they're doing. A few cautions with it is that we have to be careful as teachers that we're not making it such a big deal that we're encouraging kids to speed read. And so that's not the message we want to give. We don't want to give, okay, this is the speed read time. How fast can you read? We also don't want to ignore, as teachers in general, prosody by just encouraging kids to only improve their speed or their correct words. So it's a great kind of dipstick on how are you doing right now, but it's not the thing that we want to hyper focus on with kids. It can also cause a lot of anxiety for our kids with signs of dyslexia or learning disabilities to have to read quickly for a minute. Okay, so these are the big 4 teaching resources for reading fluency that we wanted to share with you. Florida Center for Reading and Research has lots of free things of all parts reading. So that's where I got some of the sailboat thing. And the mega book, so that one's all free. The mega book of fluency costs money, but it has some really, really great resources in it. Read Naturally is kind of the leading intervention for reading fluency. The only thing Read Naturally does though is, well, the two things it does is you can hear it on the CD or you can hear the audio, and then you repeatedly read it. It doesn't actually directly teach how to chunk things in phrases or how to add emphasis to important parts. So it's not a direct instruction. It's just a repeated reading and hearing it. The Literacy Nest is my favorite go-to for decodables. They're not free, you do have to buy them, but she knows her stuff, and she has a really great decodable sentences and decodable passages. Becca, do we want to show Florida Center for the Florida Center one?
I say we just keep moving forward. Yeah,
that's it. Good.
So we encourage you to take a look at the Florida Center for Reading Research. It is a little tricky to maneuver, but if you set some time aside, you'll be able to figure it out. Okay, so we're switching over to writing. And if you don't have a piece of paper and something to write with, please find something. We are going to do a writing experience that I do want you guys to experience it, because I think it really helps us understand our students with dyslexia, students possibly with dysgraphia, students with learning disabilities. Okay, so obviously I'm sure many of you have seen the top child. We really don't want to see this. So I'm going to try and give you some ideas to get to the kid on the bottom, the kid that is writing. And you've seen this before. Writing really has a lot of components to it. So it has critical thinking. You have to pay attention to the grammar, punctuation. There's different types of writing that you're going to do. You also need to think about who you're talking to, what words you're going to use, and then obviously paying attention to your spelling. So when we ask students to write, we really need to consider what that encompasses. It encompasses quite a bit. So thinking about the writing process, it includes all of these skills. And you probably know that it has all of these pieces. But maybe there's some new ones for you. And memory does include long-term memory, short-term memory, working memory. So again, be considerate of when you require students to write, it actually has a lot of pieces to it. I listened to a podcast, which is linked here below, by Dr. George McCloskey. And he was focusing specifically on executive functioning, and it was focused on students with dysgraphia, which I'll get into, but I wanted to explain executive functioning, which was one of the components on the previous slide. So when you think about your brain, the executive function portion is like a supervisor. So that's why I have the little guy on the top. He's making sure that your brain, the rest of your brain is doing what it needs to do. So here's some examples like self-regulating, self-determination, etc. Okay, don't get overwhelmed by this graphic. You can look at it later. But again, these are all the pieces of executive function. So if you have a hard time attending, that's going to impact everything you do that requires attention. Also like monitoring yourself with time, things like that. So executive function, I'm not going to get a ton into, but I would recommend that you check this this presentation that Dr. George McCloskey did. It was very interesting for me even, and I've been working with students that have difficulty with executive function for a while, but this isn't a piece that can impact students' writing. He also had this great representation of writing. So we have the, okay, excuse my dyslexia, I believe holarchy and then hierarchy. And I'm going to focus on the hierarchy. They're showing the same thing. It just kind of has a different perspective for that. I like the hierarchy because it's a stair piece. And when you think about all of the pieces that you have to do to write, you have to start with an idea, then you have to find the language to write it down. Then you actually need to like get the writing going. And then you have to go back and edit and revise. So we're asking students to produce a lot. And honestly, if a kid gets stuck at the beginning, they're not going to get to the writing part because they're still trying to come up with an idea. Or if they're stuck with figuring out what words to use, that's where they're going to get stuck. So if you have your kid melting down, like we saw on that first slide, that's maybe something to look into. Like try and help them in that area so that they don't get stuck, so that they can express their ideas, because they definitely have ideas there and we just need to help them get them out. And Angie, as we're moving along, I'm not watching the chat just because of time. Feel free to jump in if you think I should address something. All right, all of you guys probably know we have these great examples of the writing process. I love the one on the left where it has the little clothespins. So you could have that up in your classroom showing where a student is when everyone is doing a writing task. Same thing with the graphic on the right. Obviously, we have students revise and edit. It's important to know the difference. Angie and I were talking about this a couple days ago, and revising really is that language piece, or making sure that the child is getting out what they want to express. So they're going back and looking at, you know, do I have all of the words in there for that sentence to make sense? So looking at the grammar, is it expressing what I was trying to say? Whereas editing is going back and fixing mistakes in like spelling, punctuation, capitalization, things like that. So it's important for kids to understand that, because I think sometimes we have kids do both at the same time, and that's really kind of a lot, I think, to put on students. I think you should have, like you see in the graphic on the left, having them doing that separately so that they're seeing that revising is really like looking over, are you saying what you want to say? Okay, so when we're thinking about writing, the big question is, what is your purpose? Why are you having your students write, whether they're at the elementary level, middle school, or high school? So are you trying to see if they're understanding the curriculum that you're teaching them? Are you looking for their fluency or their ability to spell or to write? One common assessment is the corrective word sequence at the elementary level, where you're looking at their sequence of words. So it's the grammar, capitals, punctuation, number of words. And typically it's a 3-minute writing assessment. And it typically looks like this. I used it for a while at the beginning of my time at the elementary level, and then I decided I did not want to use it anymore, because my students with dyslexia and my students with learning disabilities and dysgraphia really struggle with this, because not only am I taking points away from them for not having correct spelling, if they miss a punctuation piece, that's two points, because it's the punctuation and the capital. And then same with, you know, sequence, correct word sequence is looking at the grammar. So really, I don't use writing goals for my students that have correct word sequence anymore. I look at, can they write a complete sentence? Because the other piece here you'll see is timing. You're expecting students to have their idea and then do that entire ladder in one step, or most of that letter in like one step. So they think about it, they maybe share it, and then they have to write it for 3 minutes. And if your purpose is to see if they can write more words, great, use that. But just be cautious, especially if you think your student has signs of dyslexia that impacts their writing. You're not really doing them a service by using this assessment, in my opinion. The other one that Angie has been using in her class is the red boat sailing. Did you want to talk about it, Angie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I give my students, and Deanna on here does this with her 2nd grade too, a very similar sentence. So we say to them, he can see a red boat sailing in the sun. It's a long sentence. I give it to beginning 1st graders, and then we do it 3 times in the year. And then we have a system of assessing their decoding or their encoding skills by giving numbers. So they get points for every sound, and then they get points, extra points for if they are accurately applying spelling rules. They also get separate convention points for capital, period, spaces, and then we decided to do negative points if they have capitals in the middle of their sentence. So this is an average 1st grader in the middle of this school year. So boat, he got 3 points for because he has all 3 sounds. Boat. He did not use anything to make the O say O, whether it was a vowel team or magic E or anything. He didn't, so he didn't get an extra point for that. And the word sailing, I gave him 4 points because he wrote S-E-L-E-N. So that first vowel sound I hear is like an A, so he should have put an A there. So I gave him a point for and not for the E he wrote. And then O-E, say lean. So I could see how he could put L-E-N. He doesn't know ing yet, so he didn't get a point for that. And he didn't make an A, or he didn't make anything to So to make it the A say A, like to make it a long vowel. So it kind of just breaks it down in a very concrete way. And then then it produces data because it produces a number. So then I can see, are they gaining skills over the school year? How do they compare to their peers? What's the class average and how do they appear? How do they compare?
Sanji, and this is not timed.
Yeah.
And it's dictated.
We also do just that's not given numbers for is we have them draw a picture, and that's our comprehension assessment, but it was a little too hard. We didn't feel fair to like put it in the numbers. We wanted the numbers. So there is a comprehension where we just say yes or no. Do they have a sailboat? Do they have a red boat? Do they have a boy watching? And is there a sun? So we also have like kind of this like draw what that sentence means so that we can assess comprehension, but we don't grade it with points.
Thank you. All right, get your piece of paper and writing utensil. And if you don't have one right now, I'd encourage you to try this later because it's just a really interesting experience. Okay, so the purpose is that I want you to write a paragraph about the picture over here on the right, telling a story about the picture. We're only going to do 1 minute, so you're not going to write for very long. But before you start writing, I have some rules you need to follow. Place the 3 words with which you want to begin each sentence at the end of that sentence without otherwise changing word order. Use on in place of an and an in place of on whenever you write those letter combinations, and that's within words or when they're by themselves. Place your concluding sentence at the top of the page. And then without otherwise changing the spelling, place the letter H to the left of the letter T in all words that begin with T. Okay, get your pencils ready or writing utensil. We're gonna do this for 1 minute. Ready, go. All right, that's 1 minute. Okay, if you want to say anything in the chat about that experience, please do. I did this at my training about dyslexia, and we did do 3 minutes. And this was mine. Notice my handwriting is atrocious. So I said whether Cynthia was staying dry despite the dreary. Morning the rain poured down 1 October, get to the funeral. And I didn't quite follow the rules. If you'll notice, I put an H in front of T in get, and it was only supposed to be when T was at the beginning of a word. So I didn't even follow all the rules correctly. I had 19 total words in 3 minutes. And at a 5th grade level, that 5th graders are expected to write 58 correct words per minute on a correct word sequence. So this is one of the reasons why I don't like correct word sequence anymore, because it really is forcing kids to try and follow these rules that we have for spelling, sentences, paragraphs, and ideas, trying to get ideas out. So it really makes it hard. And I apologize, I can't look at the chat just yet, but I really do hope you share how that made you feel. When I did this, it was really frustrating for me. And I feel like I can write fairly well, aside from spelling. All right, so I'm gonna talk real quickly about dyslexia versus dysgraphia. I do have a video here. We don't have time to watch. Please go back and watch it. It does make a statement about students with dysgraphia have a hard time making friends. I don't agree with that. That does not connect to dysgraphia. Oop, it wants to play anyways. Okay, so this is kind of what 2 students that I have, They're both have the same writing assignment in front of you. Notice that the child with dysgraphia has a lot of great art on the side. He loves to draw and he's really good at it. So I know he's not having fine motor problems, although that can be a concern for students with dysgraphia. You'll also notice too that both of their handwriting is kind of sloppy. And I think the kid with dyslexia usually can write better. She just didn't on this one. But notice on the right, the sizing of the letters aren't the greatest, things like that. And I'm just going to point out, so the student on the left with dyslexia, the sentences are, for the most part, make a lot of sense. She didn't drop any words. There's some misspelling, but not a ton. Like she pretty much did the assignment. I'm going to read to you what's on the right. You'll notice that there's barely any punctuation. This is what he meant to write. Mr. and Mrs. Iverson were walking in the forest when they saw something unusual. During the night, Mr. and Mrs. Iverson heard noises coming from the garage. A reptile with wings. See, in the hike, we saw an egg, so we stole it. See, we were unauthorized, but now it hatched. It flew out of the pickup truck. We brought it and raw the egg. We thought a rock or object hatched. It knocked the lamp over. It was strange, that night, I mean. So his writing really was lacking punctuation. There was some issues with words and expressing what he was trying to say. But when I read this before he read it to me, I didn't know what he was trying to say because I didn't know someone was trying to talk. Because you'll notice in some of the sentences where he has see in the hike, he's not expressing what's in his mind, but he's using vocabulary that my student on the left is not using, like unauthorized, things like that. So if your student looks like the one on the right, it's possible that they have dysgraphia. So both students for instruction are going to need help with letter formation, sentence structure, punctuation, paragraph structure. And like we talked before, students with dyslexia need a lot more with spelling patterns, letter sounds. For students with dysgraphia, they're going to be dropping letters. Letters are going to be reversed, like they might have farm and spell it F-R-A-M. So they know what it's supposed to have, they just don't know the right order. And then their spacing between words is not great. Their letter sizes are not going to be the same, and they'll be floating. And you will see some of this with dyslexia, and there could be a comorbidity where a student with dyslexia also have dysgraphia, but I see dysgraphia more in students with behavior needs, and then ADHD is another big one, and then students that they're totally normal, or not normal, sorry, average. They're totally average in everything else. We had a student like that Angie and I worked with. He was at grade level in reading, grade level in math, could not write. And it wasn't that he didn't have ideas. It was just all of these other pieces on the right. Something I do want to encourage you to try and include is crossing the midline. If you don't, you might have a student that will literally keep moving their whole body instead of moving across the page. So they're not following what the page is saying or what they're writing, and they need to work on cross body movement, which is huge for students with dyslexia and dysgraphia. So that was my cute little picture to try and explain that. There's a lot of fun things that you can do in your classroom or talk to the occupational therapist. They can give you ideas. This bottom picture is from our occupational therapist where we literally will do our arms. We were dabbing today and then clapping and then dabbing, so working on that cross body movement, and the kids loved it. It was really fun. Also to consider is how students are sitting, making sure that they're sitting in a proper position. And I think that this has been hard since COVID. I have a lot of students that like to be on their knees and like leaning over the desk. So I'm trying to reteach them that that's not how we sit. It's not how we read. It's not how we write. And we have to think about the future. Two, just thinking about students that maybe are struggling. Maybe they didn't have very good pre-writing skills, because these are all skills that they need to have prior to writing letters, because letters are hard. And as you probably know, you need to teach how to write letters. One great program for that is Handwriting Without Tears. Magic C is one that I constantly go back to. I'm sorry, this one's blurry. When students are making D, I always make them make it with a C first, because then they don't confuse how to write it. The other thing too that I just learned watching the guy talk about dysgraphia is having students look for letters that are reversed. So on the left, you'll notice that the student that tried this for the first time could only find 3 letters accurately that were reversed in 15 seconds. And the student also could not write their alphabet and was reversing Z and some other letters and was really frustrated because they knew that they could do better. On the right, after they had practiced trying to find and really pay attention to the letters, the student was able to find 49 and could write their alphabet. So it is possible to teach students to write the letters appropriately if they're struggling, and using, helping them see what doesn't look quite right. We've talked about these before, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but there's a lot of basic letter sound things that you can do with students. And again, please have students read what they write, especially when they're working on spelling. Something else that's great with the dyslexia toolkit that we've talked about before from the PDX reading specialist, like on this one, it's the duck on a desk spelling rule. And you'll notice there's phrases and sentences. So you can dictate, and students are not only practicing spelling, they're practicing writing a sentence or a phrase. And I will tell them, okay, this is a phrase, so no period. This is a sentence, so you should have a capital and a period at the end. Something else I started doing this year is showing students visually how a sentence should look. So we'd start with my examples in my pocket chart. I have these awesome tiles, which I got from Angie, where they got to pick, and then they wrote silly sentences, and they loved it. I did this with second graders, but it's very easy. They don't have to come up with the words for themselves, although some of them did add other words, as you can see, and they just kept wanting to do it. So it's a great way to show them sentence structure without even requiring them to be able to spell the words. And I also would tell them what the words were. I didn't require them to be able to read the word wheels if they were still working on their CVC reading skills. And I had everyone writing. It was great. Another program that's great for working on sentences is Step Up to Writing. So again, it shows how to do a complete sentence. It has lots of practice. It also has an example of proficiency. So it shows you what your points would be for like a basic sentence, and then what an advanced sentence should get for points. And then it actually gives examples, and then it has students practice, and they give you lots of opportunities to have students practice this. So this is a great way to show students when they write why maybe we tell them to write more or that they need to add detail. But this is a great way to show them how to do that, because you need to show them how to do that. We can't just expect students to do that. On the previous activity, I added in numbers because I realized when students were practicing writing sentences, they were just throwing numbers in at the end. Like they wanted to buy silly kittens, 100 of them. So I taught them that 100 needs to go before silly. So it helps them visualize what is happening with the words. Oop, where'd this go? Oh, can you guys see? Well, guess we're going to a black screen. Hold that thought for a second. We'll try this again.
There it is.
All right. Sorry about that. Oh, my screen is still black. Is yours black?
Yeah. Can you go to the next slide?
Yeah, good idea. This one just shows you ways that you can expand sentences using sentence starters and frames. Oh, yes. Okay, The Writing Revolution. Please check out this book if you need help with writing. They teach about kernel sentences, where you take a sentence and you teach kids to use these questions to expand it. So you could use this in class. Pyramids were built, and then you ask them to answer some of those questions, and then they turn it into the sentence that you see. In ancient times, pyramids were built in Egypt to protect the body of the deceased pharaoh. So they're directly applying what they're learning. So the purpose would be to assess their comprehension of the material while also working on writing. Something else you can do to help students expand sentences is using because, but, so, and this is from the Writing Revolution. I started doing this with third graders last year, and they loved it and they did great. And I was doing this in the resource room. This should really be done across grade levels, across, what's it called? Different, so math, reading, science. So biology teachers should be doing this. Everyone should be using this. So you can see this one is about Douglas, and there's a link below that talks about it from Teach Like a Champion. But you have kids use because to explain it, but to explain it, and so to explain it. And it works really well to help kids expand their sentences and write more than what they're writing. This is an example of a paragraph frame. This can be helpful for students if they're just having a hard time figuring out how to do a paragraph and you want them to see how to compare and contrast. Step Up to Writing, again, has a great way to teach writing a paragraph using color coding. So I encourage you to check that out. They do have multiple levels. I'm only using the first level, which is supposed to be kinder through 3rd grade. And that does more than writing paragraphs. It did the sentences, also does note taking, all kinds of things, but it shows them visually what is supposed to be going on. And I love the color coding. And it also has stars and the green light, red light. It just is really helpful for students. Graphic organizers are also super important. So the student I showed you earlier who had the pterodactyl on his drawing, which is what the story was about, he definitely needs a graphic organizer before he writes because his writing is all over the place. One colleague of mine explained it like it's like a firework goes off and he has all these thoughts, which is great, but we need to help him rein it in, but he needs to get those ideas out, right? But these are just some examples. So consider when you're having your students do a longer writing piece to do a graphic organizer first. It just helps them guide their own writing. Oh, we made it. Okay, accommodations. There's a lot on here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the idea is that I really want you to think about that writing and how it made you feel when you had to do the 1 minute write, and thinking about your child in your class that maybe just needs a little help somewhere to be able to express themselves. We oftentimes have students dictate to us or scribe. I'm still trying to figure out how to use the text to speech because I figured out that you can do that with Chromebooks. So like my student that I showed you earlier with dysgraphia, like he definitely needs to sit and listen to the writing so that he can hear that it doesn't make sense and then figure out, with my help, how to put in that punctuation. So go back and take a look at this. Some of these will be familiar to you. All right, and then we have some resources here, which we'll get back to. Angie, did you want to jump in?
The resources, we're going to add the one that you've talked about also. So we're going to, the resources has some podcasts on it that we've used to like kind of learn about it for this. A little bit about Decoding Dyslexia is our organization that we're a part of, the nonprofit that we're a part of. So definitely follow them or find them if you haven't. And then, yep, go to the next one. Next month is our last presentation of this series. And next month we're talking about comprehension. I think I was really excited for the fluency and the comprehension one because they're two areas that we talk that I feel like I hadn't thought about enough. And so I'm really excited for next month's also. So next month we're talking about comprehension. And then just a plug for the RTI conference that's coming up later this month. It is absolutely free. And so, and it has a lot of the big names there for keynote speakers, as well as all the breakout sessions. Some of the biggest names in reading will be at this conference. So that's a live link to it. When you get the slideshow, you can click on that or you can Google it and find it. So hopefully you're going to that if you're interested. And reach out to us if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, if you want to bounce ideas off. We love talking about this. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out to us if you would like to. So I think that we are done. You will get a copy of, they're actually putting all of our slideshows and presentations into one place as they upload them. So this has a link to that one place where all the, we didn't copy, we didn't record the first few, but we have previous slideshows and the recordings of the presentations all in one place that's happening. So once you get one, you should get the other ones as they have uploaded. So We really appreciate you coming tonight. I'm going to stop the recording, but to kind of bring it to a closure, but we will stay on if you have any questions or if you want to unmute and join in. So thank you for coming.